Hi everyone, my name is Hiba. I'm a second year MPH candidate at the Boston University School of Public Health, and I spent the summer in Morocco as well, looking at the differences in hormone receptor status in breast cancer cases. So to give you a little background, this is a reiteration of what's been said previously, but breast cancer is one of the most common forms of cancer among women. The World Cancer Research Fund found in 2018 alone that there were almost 2 million new cases diagnosed of breast cancer. So hormone receptor status ties into breast cancer cases in that hormone receptor status can be used to measure the severity of breast cancer. It can also be used to measure diagnosis and then response to therapy as well. Looking at breast cancer specifically in Morocco, like other developing countries, we see that rates are rising. So between 2004 and 2008, there was an annual rate increase of 2.85%. And like other developing countries, we find that cases are diagnosed at later, more aggressive stages, and it's diagnosed in a younger population as well. So this study built on previous studies done by C students, and then also specifically a study done in Egypt by Dr. Solomon. It found that women in urban areas in Egypt were often more likely to be diagnosed with an estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, or ER positive breast cancer, compared to women in rural areas. And this is possibly due to an influence of xenestrogens. So xenestrogens are man-made chemicals that often replicate the naturally recurring hormones in the body, like estrogen, and so that can cause higher rates of ER-positive breast cancer cases to occur. So the aim and objective of my study was to examine the distribution and proportion of recorded hormone receptor status among breast cancer patients at two sites in Morocco, Casablanca and Fez. Casablanca was chosen primarily because previous C students have traveled there. Casablanca also is a city of about 3.6 million people. It's the largest city in Morocco, and it's unique in that it has a population-based registry. Fez is a newer location, but it was chosen primarily because it has more demographic variability, so there's a lot of rural patients who travel from neighboring regions to the hospitals there. I wanted to determine if the cases of estrogen receptor positive cancers are higher in these urban areas as compared to rural areas. The graph that you see is a study done in northeastern Morocco, and it reiterates some of the points made on the last slide, that breast cancers is the most common form of cases diagnosed in Morocco. Some methods. Like Bridget was saying, the methods differed between Casablanca and Fez. So Casablanca has a population-based registry. Our final total count for cases in that system from 2013 to 2015 was about 2,839. We touched on this previously as well, but there are private versus public hospitals, and so cases were already recorded in the registry as internal or external. For Fez specifically, it's a hospital-based registry, so cases that were coming in were only seen at the hospital, but we were doing a lot of manual data entry for those cases, and then we supplemented them with oncology and pathology records as well for missing data. So initial results and observations, some of these numbers have changed recently. As I've come back to the US, I've been able to clean the data a little bit more and run better numbers. And so when I was classifying patients as internal or external, I did that in two different ways. So internal patients were patients that were seen at the main hospital in Casablanca and then had their pathology done at that hospital as well. And so you can see that number out of the registry cases is only about 37% versus external patients. So those can be stratified in two ways. One, in that they were seen at the main hospital in Casablanca but went to an external lab to have their pathology records done, or they went to an external lab completely, or external hospital completely, I'm sorry. And so that was about 63% of cases. And Table 2 describes the availability of IHC information in the database. So you can see, for the most part, that patients had no IHC data in the database, only a few percentages. There's a bit missing for internal patients, but it was still a smaller number than we expected originally, so we had to make some adjustments along the way to accommodate for that missing data. So Table 3 looks at the availability of IHC data for Casablanca for external cases specifically. So you can see that most of the cases that we found actually had data for estrogen or progesterone. Most of them had stuff for HER2 as well, and then a few cases also had Ki67 information. Table 4 and Table 5 look at Fez data specifically, so we were able to obtain the 2017 Fez registry database, and that was already codified by urban and rural status, which allowed me to run these numbers. So you can see that estrogen positive cases were slightly lower in terms of counts, but if you go to the urban-rural status in Table 5, you can see estrogen positive cases are higher for urban areas as compared to rural areas, which is kind of supports the theory that urban areas might have higher cases of ER-positive breast cancer cases. So proposed future analysis and directions. Casablanca, we're still in the process of getting some external and private lab data, and we're hoping to get that pretty soon from our mentors back there. We're still also waiting on some insurance information for the registry. We're hoping to stratify the data based on this urban and rural status, and then stratify it based on missing and available HRS status as well, and then analyze to see why that might be. Some of the things we might be thinking about is that people from lower SES areas or who are public insurance and have gone to public hospitals might be missing that data for various reasons, like cost. In FES, for example, we're looking to categorize urban and rural status for certain parts of the database as well, and then stratify the data based on internal or external patients, those referred patients, and then analyze the links between that data as well, and then compare the two of FES and Casablanca if possible. So revisions and changes, everyone had changes in their projects, so I thought I would kind of touch as to why I changed my questions just a little bit. So like Bridget mentioned, we have missing data in both data sets, and that was primarily due to how the methods of how data is collected. So because the registry staff is going out to these external and internal areas and collecting the data based on just one registry form, there's no place for them to record hormone receptor status or just hormone receptor status on that form. And so it really depends on who's going out and getting the data and whether or not they're inputting that system then. So it's really varied. And so it's just a priority of what data is available and what data is collected by that external lab. And then availability of IHC data in the database. So it wasn't seem like a priority for the population-based or even the hospital-based registry to have that information for them because they were just looking at incidence and proportions to see if it was rising in Morocco. Availability in medical records as well, and so this kind of had to do with collaboration between departments. We found that a patient who was seen in oncology often had a different record for surgery and a different record in pathology, and it was 3 different databases, and that could not including duplicates or like a slight misspelling of a name, so one patient could have 5 different records. And so there was quite a bit of challenges in trying to address that in our data. So my learning experience, so the top picture is from the entrance to the CHU Ibn Rushd Hospital, the main hospital we were in Casablanca, and the bottom one is from the Hassan II Hospital in Fez. And so I learned a lot about the Moroccan healthcare system and the record technology, and I've just found that it's in a constant flux of transition and progress, where they're getting better databases, but then older systems are kind of going out of style, and so it was always kind of depending on where we were and what department we were, how technological we could use the systems. And then record technology kind of also differed along those same lines. Like everyone else, the importance of communication. So it was really important to be flexible, but to be firm in what we needed from our mentors and from the staff available. The necessity for collaboration between departments. So we found there was such a disconnect between oncology and pathology and surgery and the registry that we often got a little frustrated there. And then the significance of taking breaks. So Emily and Bridget and I were really fortunate that our mentors were so supportive of us kind of taking a step back from the research every now and then when we got a little frustrated and we were able to travel and see the country, but then come back, a few days later and focus back on our research. So ideas and topics for future students. We mentioned, Dr. Solomon mentioned this, the private clinics and hospitals. From our mentors, we learned that sometimes private clinics and hospitals aren't really willing to share their information, partially due to revenue or having to report this information for tax reasons. And so it would be really interested if a student could get access to some of those records to see if there is a discrepancy in outcomes and mortality and treatments between patients who choose private clinics and hospitals versus those who have to resort to public ones. Medical records and updates in technology. In Casablanca, for example, we were trying to supplement some data from the 2013 to 2016 pathology database, but we found out the database had actually crashed and all the data had been lost. So it would be really interesting if a student could go and focus on that database and see if there's a way to kind of streamline the process of updating medical records. And then outcomes and mortality. So Emily found this out, but they are implementing a new death certificate in Morocco, and so originally that information was not available in the hospital. So it'll be interesting to look and see if hospitals will now be recording outcomes and mortality to see if there is similar trends or mortality trends in Morocco that we can look at. And then strengths and limitations, Bridget touched on this. So strengths, we have a large sample size in both sites. In Casablanca and Fez, Casablanca, we had kind of one source of data, just the registry, where in Fez we had a variety of sources, so pathology, oncology, a case control study, and they can have strengths and limitations associated with both. Our mentors and staff were willing and helpful. Every single day they were always willing to help us with whatever we needed, contacting external labs or having to look through the records system with us. And then obviously the transition in progress to a more streamlined system. So the registry just got a new database, and while it's only updated for 2019, we hope to be able, our student might be able to go there and look at future years once they've been input into the system. Limitations, various data sources might introduce some bias, so obviously private hospitals can be unwilling to share some of the information with public ones or with the registry in general, so that might change some of the results. Missing information, sometimes it was hard to contact external labs just because they were so far removed from the public system, and then there's lots of follow-up necessary because we do need to get insurance status, we do need to get some of that other information from other labs. Future goals and career plans. I'm looking to maybe continuing education, so maybe either medical school or a PhD, still kind of keeping my areas open. Other interests, I really enjoy infectious diseases, and I'd like to see if there's an area where infectious disease and cancer coincide. I am interested working in low SES areas and then continue research and maybe possible drug development as well. I think that's really cool. Acknowledgements and thanks. I couldn't have done it without Bridget and Emily. Dr. Solomon, obviously, who came to Morocco several times and was really helpful in getting kind of our mentors to get on the projects with us. And then our Casablanca mentors and staff, Dr. Kokouri, Dr. Benhadou, Ibrahim, Dr. Benadir, and then in Fez, Dr. Khalis and Dr. Hind. And these are some pictures that we took. The ones on this side are from Casablanca, and the one on that side is from Fez. So thank you, guys.